Today is Kiddushin Daf Yud Ches Kiddushin 18. We're going to start on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom where the Gemara is discussing. The Gemara said yesterday that if a man was a convert and his father was an idolater, that even though biblically speaking he doesn't inherit, the rabbi said he can inherit because otherwise we're worried he's going to go back to his idolatrous ways. Now the Talmud tells us something else. Let's say the father converted, meaning to say, let's say the father converted, and under those circumstances where the father converted, and so the idolatrous son wants to inherit him. The ger as a ger, or one convert against another convert. You can say, let's say, two brothers converted, or father and a son, Rashi says, who converted. So they don't inherit each other, not biblically speaking, because biblically speaking, they're not related, because gerish and iskar because a convert who converts is like a child who's born. So, and rabbinically, we're not worried that they're going to go back to their idolatrous ways under these circumstances. Titania, we went to the Brisa, we went to the Brisa, if a person borrowed money from a convert whose children converted with him, so even though genetically and biologically they have a relationship, but spiritually they're considered to be not related, he shouldn't pay back the money to the child of this convert. And if he returns the money, the sages are not going to be pleased with him. So we see from here that you don't pay back the money to two converts. So we see from here that two converts, they don't inherit each other. So the Gemara says, but don't we say in other circumstances that the sages do say that he can inherit from him? So again, if we have a father and son and both convert, do they inherit from each other or not? So one source says they don't, and the sages don't want you to pay them back, and the other sources say that they do. So the Gemara says, Lokasha, depends the nature of how they converted. In one circumstance, it was where the child converted and was conceived not in a state of holiness, meaning to say the child was conceived and born before he converted, and then he converted. And there the sages don't want you to pay back anything. But the reason why they don't want you to pay back is because then you'll misunderstand the law. So people will see it and be confused. On top of it, is one is in the latter cases where he was conceived before he converted, but the child was born after his mother had already converted. And so therefore, under those circumstances, we say that the sages do think you should pay back. So therefore, that's the distinction. He says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he says, idolater, biblically speaking, can inherit his own father who's an idolater. Idolaters can inherit each other. And how do you know this? Because it says, we see from here, Esav has an inheritance. And here says, well, technically speaking, Esav is not an idolater. Tell me, Yisrael Mumar Shani. Esav is what's called the Yisrael Mumar. He's just a Jew who's a heretic. It doesn't mean that he's an idolater. So maybe that's why he inherits. Where says from here, children of Lot, I gave R as an inheritance. So we see from here that Lot's children who are idolaters, they do have an inheritance. So the Gemara says, well, Rav Chia bar Abin, who says that it's based upon the verse that idolaters can inherit, why doesn't he say like the position of Rava, which you saw earlier, which said V'chishevim koneo? Which proves that they can inherit. The Gemara says, so Rava's response, so if Rava would say, my time he says, it doesn't say what Rava says it says. It doesn't say not with the errors. It's just, maybe it's just speaking. And that's why it says he calculates with the one who sold him, but it's not necessary to exclude the errors. The Rava, my time why does Rava not say Lot's answer that it's derived from the verse of Kilvnei Lot Nasati is our Yerusha? He says, Mishum Kvodo da Avram Shani. He says, because maybe the reason why Lot gets to inherit is because he's related to Avram, and the honor of Avram is different. Okay, so now the Gemara says, the Hebrew slave has certain qualities which the female Hebrew slave, the male Hebrew slave, certain characteristics which the female Hebrew slave does not. And the female slave has certain things that the male doesn't. The Hebrew slave goes out after 6 years, after the Jubilee year, and with the death of his master. But the female slave does not have this. And what does the female slave have? She goes out with signs of puberty. She cannot be sold twice. And we redeem her even against her will, even against his will. But this is not the case with the Hebrew slave. So Gemara now has to analyze this brisa. The male slave has these characteristics which the female slave doesn't. The Gemara says, but wait 1 second. We said now like this in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah it says, our Mishnah it said, that the Amevriya has the extra quality that she redeems herself by once she goes through the signs of puberty, which means that it is in addition to the 3 signs that a male slave goes free, i.e. Shanim, Yovel, and the death of the master, years Jubilee and death of the master. So we have a contradiction between our brisa here and the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, okay. So Amar Rav Sheshes could go in Shiyada. So the brisa here is talking about a case where we're talking about a case where the brisa is saying that she got fully married. The Yada is where he married her. And so since he married her, then she doesn't go out with the ways that it says in the Mishnah she goes out. She only goes out with the divorce, because then she's fully married to the master. She's fully married to him. So the Gemara says, Yada, well, if he married her, Pshita, Gita Bai, of course she doesn't go out with those 3 ways like the Hebrew slave. She requires a get. She requires a full divorce. And the Gemara says, no. You might have said, you might have said, well, even though she's married, since she was first a slave, she has all those laws as well. The way she goes, she gets released. We don't say that. If that's the case, so if that's the case, why, if she's fully married, does she go out when she has the puberty? She doesn't. Gemara says no. That this is how you read that source. The source is saying, if she does not get married, she could go out not only with those 3 ways, but also with the signs of puberty. Okay, and the Mishnah, the brisa continues. The female slave cannot be sold twice. So the Gemara says, Mikal, the Eved Ivri, Nimkar V'Nisha. You mean to say that the male slave can be sold again and again? He's sold twice. But Tanya, B'Gnei Basav, we learn in the brisa, he's sold for his theft, the lo b'kfelo, but not for the kefil. When you steal something, you have to pay back the principal plus double. So let's say the slave can pay back the principal, but he can't pay back the double penalty. That is not he's not sold into slavery if that's what he can't get paid back. B'Gnei Basav, lo b'Zammo. Let's say he was a false witness and we penalized him by making him pay that which he tried to make the others pay, but he can't pay it back. We don't sell him for that. Once he sold once, you can't sell him a second time. So why do we say that the male slave can be sold a second time when the bride says he can't? So Rava says it's not a difficulty. One is by 1 theft and one is by 2 thefts. But if you stole 1 time, then you could only be sold once. And if you sold twice, you could be sold twice. That's what the source is saying. So the Gemara says, so Abai says, but no, it says in the verse that he sold v'nimkar b'gnei basa, which implies even many times. Meaning to say, if he's goes to the court one time for many thefts, it's all called his theft, and he should be able to be sold multiple times. So therefore, Abaye gives a different answer. Abaye says, one is by one person. If he stole from one person, then he's only going to be sold. He sold from one person, and he goes to the court one time for him. Then he can only be sold one time for him, even for many thefts. But if he stole from two people, that they bring him to the court two separate times, so then he can be sold twice. Tanu Rabbanan. In this context, the rabbis teach us Genevo Elef V'Shava Chameshros. So let's say he stole something that's worth $1,000, but the person himself is only worth 500. Nimkar v'chozer v'nimkar. So then he can be sold twice. He sold for 500, and then he goes back and sold another 500 to make up his time. But let's say Genevo Chameshros V'Shava Elef. Actually, he sold something that's 500. He's worth 1,000. Then he's not sold at all because he's worth much more than what he stole. Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer says, if his theft corresponds to the amount that of his sale price, he can be sold. Otherwise, he can't be sold. And he says, in this case, Rabbi Eliezer is more meritorious than the rabbis. Why, if he stole 500, he's worth 1,000? Do we say he's not sold? Because we say we sell all of him and not half of him. Here too, the Torah says if he sold for his theft, not if he sold for half his theft. And so therefore, if he stole 500 and he's worth 1,000, therefore, if he stole 1,000, he's worth 500. We don't sell him to make up for half his theft. That's Rabbi Eliezer's position. And we redeem her against her will. Against the will of the master. We force her to release her. How would he release her? The kasvanale shtarad. We write to him a contract for a value, and then she has to make it up to him. He's holding a pearl in his hands. We're going to take away his power, meaning we're taking away his assets. We don't believe in government seizure of assets. No, what it means is against the will of the father. That's how we force the father to redeem her, because otherwise the family would have a blemish upon him. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, a male slave also, we force the family to redeem the male slave, because otherwise it looks bad for the family. The Gemara says, well, that's not our concern. Why? Because we don't force the family to redeem a male slave, because the male slave could just go out and sell himself again. Gemara says, well, the father can go and sell his daughter again also. Gemara says, no, he can't actually. The father cannot go back and sell his daughter a second time. Whose position is that the father cannot go back and sell his daughter a second time? Money. This is the position of Rabbi Shimon. Tanya, what does Rabbi Shimon say? Says the Brisa, Mocher Adam Espito Ishus. A man can sell his daughter to be a wife, meaning to say he could betroth her and take the Kiddushin money. Vishona, and he could do this a second time. That's case one. V'shifchos Vishona. Excuse me. A man can sell his daughter to be a man can sell his daughter to be a wife, and then he can repeat it and sell and betroth her again. He can betroth her to be he can sell her to be a maid, and then go back and repeat that. And if he had sold her to be a slave, afterwards he can go and betroth her to a man. But if he had betrothed her to be a wife after that, he's not allowed to sell her into slavery. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, "Kishem shein adam mocher es bito l'shifchos," just like a man can't sell his daughter to be a slave achar ishos after she was already married once. Kach ein adam mocher es bito l'shifchos achar shifchos. So too, he can't sell his daughter to be a slave after he already sold her once. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon's of the position you can't sell your daughter twice. So therefore, we can force the father to redeem his daughter because we don't have to be worried if she's going to sell her a second time, according to Rabbi Shimon. And this dispute between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon is beputa dahani tonight. It goes back to a dispute of an earlier dispute amongst the following brisa. The Tanya, it says in the brisa, bevigdo ba. It says in the brisa, then it says in the brisa that if she is bad in the eyes of her master, and he's not allowed to sell her bevigdoba by acting deceitfully to her. But it's written bevigdoba. So how do we understand this? So the Gemara says there's a dispute between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. The first approach is Kivan Shapirish Taliso allow Shuvim Rishalam Mocher. Rabbi Akiva says once he marries her, and this is like the position of the Tanna Kama, then he's not allowed to sell her as a slave again. That's the position of Rabbi Akiva. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says bevigdoba. Kivan Shebagaba, once he sold her, he acted treacherously to her. Shuvim Rishal Mocher. He can't sell her again. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, he's like Rabbi Shimon that you can't sell it twice. So what's the dispute between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer? What are they arguing about? Rabbi Eliezer, who says that you can't sell her twice, he's in the position Yesh Emu Masoris, that we follow the way it is written. And so therefore, how is it written? So it's written bevigdo. Rashi says bevigdo ksiv v'lo bebagdo ksiv v'lo bevigdo, meaning to say ein havaras chiruk v'lo yud, and the nekuda under the bed in the place of the yud is used. So therefore, Eliezer says that whenever there is a word and we are not sure if we follow the way it's read or the way it's written, Rabbi Eliezer says we should darshan it the way it is written. And so therefore he says bevigdo from the expression of begida, because if it would have wanted to write for the garment, it would have written bebigado. So therefore that's what Rabbi Eliezer says. Whereas Rabbi Akiva Savar Yesh Emo Mikra, no, we follow the way it's read. And so therefore, since we read it as bevigdo and not bevagdo, so therefore the text is trying to tell us that once he spreads his garment over, once he marries her, he can no longer sell her. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon says that he can't do either one. Once he marries her, or if he sells her, he's not allowed to sell her, to betroth her, or sell her after either one. Rava bar Afua Yiyud Misuno Seo Erisimus. What's Yiyud? After the father sells his daughter to be an Amma Ivriya, the master has the right to marry her. That's called Yiyud. So, and we're going to discuss this for the next 2 days. So does this yiyud, she's already living in the home. So it's not like a regular marriage where there's the betrothal, and then she moves into the home, which is the nisuin. But here, we're saying she's already living in the home. And so therefore, the question is, does this yiyud make a full marriage or just a betrothal? Nafkamina, what's there? Why is there a distinction? The distinction is liyorsha, latamelo, aframeta. The distinction is: do we inherit her? Does the husband able to become tummy for her? Does he revoke her vows? So the Gemara says Tashma bevigdo ba, as Rabbi Akiva read it. Kivan shapirish ta tawisu ala shuvein or rishai umocher. Once he spreads his talus over her, then he's not going. So once he spreads his talus over her, he's not going to be able to sell her. He can't sell her. Zibuni Udo Mizabila, he's not able to sell her. But so the point is, once he spreads his talus over her, then at that point, he's not going to be able to sell her to be a slave. But the Gemara says, okay, sure, he can't sell her to be a slave a second time. However, he is allowed to betroth her to another man. V'amris, and if he would be in the position, Nisuin said that she's fully married once he does the Nisuin, once he does the Yiyud. Even Denise says that once she's fully married, once she's Nisuin, then the halacha is the father has no authority to do anything for her anymore. And so therefore we see from here that it's just doing Erisin. So when he does Yiyud, it's just doing the betrothal. No, that's not a proof. He says, Kiddushin the Amakai. No, this is not talking to a case. This Bryce is not referring to a case of Yiyud. This is talking to a case of a regular Kiddushin. Once the father has given her over to somebody who's obligated in all these supports for her, then Shuven Yachol he can't sell her to be a slave anymore. So once he gave her over for this Kiddushin, he can't then sell her after that. That's all the price is saying. It's nothing to do with Yiyud. So the Gemara says, Tashma. Again, we'll try and interpret the answer to this question. Does Yiyud do Erisin when it's suing? It says, that when the father sells her to be a slave, he's not allowed to sell her to relatives because the relatives can't do Yiyud with her. And the Amma Evriyah has to be capable of doing Yiyud. And Mishim Rebbe Lezer Amar Mokro L'Kroven. He says, Rebbe Lezer says you can sell her to relatives. Vishavin and the Tanakam Rebbe Lezer agrees. Shemochra Amano L'Kohen Gadol. The Grusha, the Chalutzel, Kohen Hedger. And the Tanakam and Rabbi Elazar both agree that you could sell her, even though she's a widow, to a Kohen Gadol, and even though she's divorced, you could sell her to the Kohen Hedger. Now, how if she was a widow, could she be sold to how would she ever be a widow? If you want to say that she betrothed herself, well, if that's the case, if she's a minor and she betrothed herself, we wouldn't call her a widow. A minor girl can't betroth herself. Now, you want to say the father betrothed her, then he wouldn't be able to sell her. But then we have the law. Once he betroths her, he can't sell her anymore. That's the halacha. So here, what are we talking about? So he betrothed her, but only was through Yiyud, meaning say he sold her, and the person betrothed her through Yiyud. That first money was not given for Kiddushin, and so therefore the father didn't betroth her. He sold her for a slave, and now at this point, she became a widow. The husband went and did Yiyud with her, the master, and now she's a widow from him, and so that's how he gives her to the Kohen Gadol. And if you would say that Yiyud doesn't just do Erusin, it does the full marriage, well, Kivin Shani says when she's fully married, then the father wouldn't have the right to sell her to be a slave. So what must we say it means? Erusin say that the Yiyud does betrothal, the Shavin, and they both agree that he's allowed to sell her to the Kohen Gadol, even though she had Yiyud, it must be that it's Erusin. So the Gemara says, but wait, how could he sell her? But if she was married, he can't sell her anymore. What must we say? Shani Erusin Dida, Erusin Davia. We must say that if he betrothed her, if the father betrothed her, that's called Erusin Dida. That's his betrothal. But it must be that's when he can't sell her again. But if she did the betrothal, if she accepted the Yiyud, she doesn't have to accept it. If the man did Yiyud on her, that's called Erusin Dida. And those are two fundamental differences. There can't be a sale after the father's Erusin, but after her Erusin, there could be a sale. So the Gemara says, and even if you want to say even if you want to say the Gemara says that it does full marriage, why don't we say the same thing? Shani nisuin dida, nisuin davia. Why don't you say that in general it does nisuin? In general, it does nisuin, but still we're allowed to sell it if she's the one who did the nisuin as opposed to him. So the Gemara says, "Hi, my no, we can't say that." Bishlam erusin shani. It makes sense to say that the erusin that the father does is different than the erusin that the master does with her. That makes sense to say that there's a difference because since the father didn't give her over for Kiddushin, he can now sell her. On Nisuin, Mishani, but we can't draw that distinction of Nisuin from another Nisuin, because since Nisuin is biblical, he's completely going out of her domain. So the Gemara says, Nachmar Yitzchak, on top of the Testament Alf, who says, I feel Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, Ma'oz HaRishon, so Kiddushin knew. He says the first money was for betrothal. So basically, when he handed her over to the master and accepted the money, she was betrothed. How is he going to be able to then sell her as a widow to the Kohen Gadol? My mukamwa. How would we ever have that scenario where he sells her as a widow to the Kohen Gadol? Gemara says mukimwa Rabbi Eliezer. Damar was shifchos achar shifchos. No, he says, well, he'd have to say that this is like Rabbi Eliezer, who says, yes, if she was a slave, he can't sell her again. But if she was betrothed, he's able to sell her. Rabbi Eliezer does say that. And so that's the way we understand it. Okay, a big shkoyach to everybody. I just want to say some of the timing that tonight, God willing,